Good morning on this Thursday, the 22nd of October, and I've just stepped outside the office. This building here is the Wantop Babuya offices. It's actually the old Lutheran church. The new church is here, and we're in North Cairns. And yeah, we don't do a lot of our teaching, but our library and admin offices are here, and there's a car there which might belong to me as well. Yeah. So this morning I thought I'd read to you from one of the smaller pastoral letters in the New Testament, from the letter of Titus, and reading verses 5 through to 16, and then just make some comments on it after that. So Paul writes to Titus saying, I left you in Crete so that you could put in order the things that still needed doing and appoint church elders in every town. Remember my instructions. An elder must be without fault. He must only have one wife, and his children must be believers and not have the reputation of being wild or disobedient. Since the church leader is in charge of God's work, he should be without fault. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for money. He must be hospitable and love what is good. He must be self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the message, which can be trusted and which agrees with the doctrine. In this way, he'll be able to encourage others with the true teaching and also to show the error of those who are opposed to it. But there are many, especially the converts from Judaism, who rebel and deceive others with their nonsense. It's necessary to stop their talk without upsetting whole families by teaching what they should not, and all for the shameful purposes of making money. It was Cretan himself, one of their own prophets, who spoke the truth when he said Cretans are always liars, wicked beasts, and lazy gluttons. For this reason you must rebuke them sharply, so that they may have a healthy faith, and no longer hold to Jewish legends and to human commandments which come from people who have rejected the truth. Everything is pure to those who are themselves pure, but nothing is pure to those who are defiled and unbelieving, for their minds and consciences have been defiled. They claim that they know God, but their actions deny it. They are hateful and disobedient and not fit to do anything good. So there are a number of things here which are important. There's actually quite a lot in passage, and probably enough for 3 or 4 sermons at least. Paul's writing to Titus, who presumably left behind in Crete. We're not exactly sure when the letter was written. It could be after the third missionary journey. We're not 100% sure. It doesn't fit into anywhere in the book of Acts that we can clearly identify. But the first point, which is the one I'm going to come back to, is this one that Titus's work was actually appoint elders, and to do that in every town, actually create self-sufficient churches. We need to mention the thing about the qualities of a leader. Yeah, the holiness, the wisdom, the self-control, all of that is important. Some people go really to town on the one wife. These are guidelines. And remember, the key verse is, let me find it here. He should be. Should, not absolutely must. But all leaders are fallible in one way or another. Should be without fault, it says in verse 7. Because he's in charge of God's work. So anything that we do which is wrong will reflect on the work that we're called to be doing. So all of those things are important. Paul also gives comment, some of the people are actually in it for the money, in it to promote their own fad thinking, and he has some quite blunt words, saying that the people in Crete have got the reputation of being liars, but the ones who are the biggest liars are these converts from Judaism who are telling all sorts of mythology and legends rather than sticking to the truth of who Jesus is. You need to stick to the truth. You need to stick to Jesus. What we've been talking about in the last week or so has been, what does God require? Believe in Jesus. And what all these other weird stories. And if we are not given to anger, if we are controlled in our life as leaders, we're more able to be able to do it. Not that we will be able to, but we are more able to hear what God is saying to us at a particular time. That's why remaining close to God, and personal holiness, having an ordered life is desirable and important. I'm not going to say it's never important, but there are times when the wheels do fall off and we do need to pick pieces up. But we also need to make sure people around us are also, and to protect people from jumping in on the fads. And that brings me back to the first point. Titus's role was to appoint elders. Now, this is very different to what happens in a lot of mainstream churches. And I was reading a missionary by the name of Roland Allen, in the last few weeks. He speaking about the missionary nature of the church. He said the role of the church is not to go plant churches that fit into an organisation, which depend on, so the church goes, oh, we don't have a pastor. Who's going to be our next pastor to do all the work for us? No, that's not what church building's about. Here, which is the pattern of Paul's ministry all the way through, is tells the good news, sees people's hearts and lives changed, and then finds out who God is calling to be leaders and appoints them so that when he leaves, the church is self-sufficient, that the church can grow. Absolutely spectacular in the case of the Thessalonian church, because Paul hadn't told them most of what he normally would tell them. He was really worried that they were going to come apart at the seams because the intense persecution that was happening there. But here, as he writes to Titus, he said, this is what's got to happen. And this is just so different to what a lot of churches do, that without an appointed pastor, they seem to wander aimlessly. That's not what God's calling us to do. It's calling us to be people in a community together that no matter what happens, with a leader, without a leader, people are able to follow what it is that God wants them to do. To be able to stand and to minister and to serve the communities that we are part of. The characteristics he talks about help us as churches to do that. That's why he's talking about elders. He's not talking about appointing pastors. He's talking about appointing leaders who can actually do that work. And I've got to tell you that in churches where leaders take this role seriously and are part of it, where they're looking out for the weird and wonderful fad ideas that come in and actually say, well, you just need to focus on this. Those are the churches that I've experienced that have been incredibly healthy. Those are the ones that continue to grow. Those are the ones that continue to see people come to Christ, irrespective of whether they've got a fancy preacher in the pulpit up the front. It's good to have somebody like that, but church doesn't stand or fall on that experience. One of my churches, I think one of the things I was most proud of was some of the things that they did in mission after I'd left, and they took 6 to 9 months to call another minister. The person they got, I think, was fantastic, and fitted them well. And they were given a few names to talk to who would not have gone all that well in that location. But what really excited me was, a couple of them were talking to me a little bit after and said, we were wondering what we were going to do here. And they actually went out to the local marketplace beside the church and started doing some activities there. And I know what would have happened if I'd been there. They would have looked at me and said, Rob, how do we go about doing this? And I'd go, I don't know. But because I wasn't there, they said, this is what we ought to do. So everything we've been talking about, teaching each other, they just went out and did it. And it was fantastic. And the church grew. That's the way it ought to be. We are called as leaders not to build organisations that are dependent upon a wider organisation. They need to be part of the wider organisation, but they need to be, we're called to help people grow to become parts of churches, part of churches that can stand on their own. Part of what we do here at One Top. The main focus of what we do is to actually enable Indigenous men and women to be leaders in the community so the communities may be self-sufficient. To overcome, not to be in a handout mentality, but to be able to stand on their own feet and to become proud, become self-sufficient, strong, mature Christians. May that be the goal that you have for you and for everybody that you know. Lord, help us to stand firm. Help us to stand and to recognise your gifts and to be sufficient as people of God, wherever we may be, in whatever community we may be. Enable our churches to become mature and to grow and to share the good news everywhere. Amen.